This is Lunch Date with Rachel and Kate, a Defocus Media production.
Hello, welcome to Lunch Date with Rachel and Kate. I am Kate. Rachel is off exploring the world today, but I have a guest with me for lunch that I'm super excited to introduce to you all. Meet Dr. Danielle Richardson. Her story is incredible, but I have found her through her inspiring work of helping women feel empowered through physical movement, their health, and finding food that fuels their bodies. But I also know her as an incredible optometrist as well. So Danielle, it's been a while. Tell me everything. How's life? Anything
Hello,
new?
hello. I'm so happy to be here and so happy to catch up. It's everything is going well. I have a new baby, so I'm so excited for what we're going to talk about today, and I'm really grateful to be here.
I'm so excited, and I'm really excited that this is brought to us all together with Johnson & Johnson Vision. Like, I know we both have a strong passion for helping our patients, and Johnson & Johnson does too. So really excited that we get to have them partnering with us today. So, big question. You said you just had your sweet little girl. So how has your pregnancy and like having a child changed the way that you practice and like approach medicine? Like, do you feel like it's changed a lot, or has it like made you more set in some of your ways?
Well, thankfully, I'm still on maternity leave, so it's still, I would say, like it's all adaptable right now. It's all flexible, but I would say it definitely makes me think differently about even just like disciplines that I practice. So, of course, myopia management is like really huge, but it's just something I didn't really think too much about or like I wasn't very interested in. But now that like we're both nearsighted, and so when I think about my daughter being nearsighted, we've gotten LASIK, so we don't have glasses or contacts anymore. But when I think about her growing up and needing glasses, it's like I actually want to avoid her getting to where I was, like a minus 750 before needing LASIK. So it makes me think about like new specialties that I'll bring into my practice, and even like flexibility, I would say, is something that I think about. Like I'm currently working pre maternity leave, I was working part time as an optometrist. I definitely still want to be part time just to allow flexibility. And ultimately, I think pursuing private practice ownership so that I have like ultimate autonomy over my schedule to be more present for my daughter.
Yeah, that's so cool. I think that was something when I was looking at becoming an optometrist, and I don't know if you felt the same way. As like so many people said, it gives you the opportunity to figure out who you want to be and how you want to do things. It gives you the flexibility to be a parent and all of that thing. So I love that you're like, yeah, I'm totally living that life now. So
Yeah.
with that, everything, I mean, I know, so I'm also currently pregnant. And so when I'm in practice, when I see people that come in that are pregnant, I already know kind of, all right, what are some things that might be going on and different things. Was there anything that, like, as you were practicing, you're like, oh, shoot, now I know more about this in pregnancy, or something specific that you kind of treated your patients with?
Yeah, so I had to. I mean, of course, we talk about pregnancy in optometry school, but I had to get really familiar with what were the manifestations of pregnancy via the eyes, and not only just for to be a good practitioner for my patients, but for myself, so I could remember and know what to look out for. So the primary changes that pregnant people are going to experience are blurry vision. They can also experience dry eye. You can also have light sensitivity. And then, of course, if you have any complications like diabetes or high blood pressure, you can be more at risk for diabetic retinopathy or preeclampsia. So there can be like retinopathy in the back of the eye. But for most pregnant patients, I would say they come in experiencing either blurry vision, a change in their refractive error, or dry eyes. Both things are really related to their fluctuating hormone levels during pregnancy. For
Oh,
me, what
yeah.
I experienced was dryness, which was my issue prior to pregnancy anyway. So that's why I got LASIK, so because my eyes were so dry when I would wear contacts. But my dryness certainly increased while pregnant.
I think it's always interesting. One time I was talking with the professor because I had a pregnant patient when I was in school and was like so curious about what to do. And they said, well, anything or everything can happen to a
Mhm.
body when there's a baby in there, and after the baby comes out. And then, as well as with everything, anything you have just gets worse. And so I was like, man, that is so true. From seeing, I think I just had a pregnant patient the other day that had papilledema, and I was like, whoa, okay, like we're not, this isn't necessarily like, oh, I can wait a couple of days for a referral. I was like, you're just going to go straight and see your OB. We're going to get a lot of stuff done because this isn't, there's more at risk here. It's so
Right,
interesting.
exactly.
Yeah. So what is your like go-to? What do you do when you have a patient that comes in? Because if it's anything like me, I have a patient that's like, you know, just became pregnant or is within their first, second trimester. And they're like, okay, I'm having all these new symptoms. I want to wear my contact lenses still. How do you work with them to be able, what's like your go-to to be able to work with them so that they can still be in their contact lenses throughout pregnancy?
Yeah, we definitely talk about daily disposable contact lenses. Most patients I find are already in daily, but if they're not, we certainly move to a daily. If they have dryness, I like to recommend Acuvue Oasis Max one day. I just feel like that is a really comfortable lens for patients.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, one thing we talk about is wear schedule. So if you're having extreme dryness in your contact lenses, perhaps you cannot wear contact lenses every single day. So like the Acuvue Oasis Max one day will get us, to one point. But if a person has really extreme dryness, I might actually have them cut back on wearing their contact lenses less. If they were in a reusable, we'll move to dailies and we'll talk about same thing, wear schedule. If your eyes start getting irritated, if they get red, take them out, right? It's a daily. So you can just pitch the lens. So I think really the main thing is making sure they're in that daily modality. And I really like the Acuvue Oasis one day max because it's super comfortable for the patients. And number two, wear time. So that wear time may need to go down to make you as comfortable as possible. And they usually understand that. So the benefit of the daily disposable is it also can accommodate a refractive error change. So if they're just a little bit more minus or a little bit more plus than they typically are, they can just buy a 30 pack or a 90 pack of the Acuvue Oasis Max one day, and they don't have to be stuck with an annual supply of contacts. So that's another way that that daily disposable lens really can help treat our pregnant patients.
Yeah, I really loved with Acuvue Oasis One Day Max too is some of that new technology they have in the lens really helps some of my patients with some of their light sensitivity as well, especially at
Definitely.
night. It's made a huge difference, and I have some patients that are like in the winter they switch from their Acuvue Oasis One Day to the Max, which I always laugh. I was like, you could just do this all year, but in the winter because it was more they had more dryness symptoms, they had more glare, they had more light sensitivity. So I always find that interesting where man, we can see it in the technology, but the true patient experience is like right on par with it all. So, I know.
100%. And that's, I think, another like the physical comfort of the Oasis Max one day is there, but just like you said, that blue filtering technology is going to really help with glare. It's going to help with light sensitivity and even with headaches if your patients are getting more headaches from screen time. So I think that's a really multi-purpose lens.
Yeah, especially I was like, I don't know if you were like this in your pregnancy, but I usually my brain stops working about an hour before bed. And bedtime for me now is like 9 o'clock. My body's like, we're doing too much. We're going to sleep. So it's like I scroll on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever for an hour before bed. And so it's nice to be able to have something for my patients that I was like, I always tell them that they would never do that. But, if they were like me,
Right.
that they would, it gives them some more, just that little less time and energy with that blue light that can kind of mess with that circadian rhythm too. So I just find it was just super helpful that I could have kind of like an all-in-one. Just kind of be
Yeah.
like, here you
Yeah,
go, we could make this work.
exactly.
So yeah, other things. I know we talked some about all of these things of like, okay, we've got dryness, we've got glaucoma, we've got all of these things. But we also have a lot of other patients that come in with like a wide variety of issues. Uh, Other things that you do in practice. I love like always finding tips and tricks and just like little things that all of us do differently to be able to meet our patients wherever they are because their stories coming in is so, can be one story and how they're going to go out of that exam lane and how I'm approaching them in my day. We meet at the same time, but we have a lot of different experiences leading up to it. So, how are you approaching patients that come in with like wide varieties of these experiences, whether it's within their, they're having a child or they're not, or things of that nature, just their different backgrounds?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I always like to remember is like we are optometrists, right? So really people come to us to number one, see more clearly, and number two, make sure their eyes are healthy. So those are the things I'm primarily focused on, no matter who comes in the door. So first of all, being able to see clearly. So making sure the person has the best prescription for them. So whether that is what they currently came wearing in, like I'm not a person who's like, oh, it changed by a quarter, so you need to buy more glasses. Like I'm not necessarily necessarily that person. So I make sure that we have the best prescription for them. But it's also like, hey, you actually have astigmatism, so we should fit you in a contact lens that is toric in design, so it's going to correct the astigmatism so you can see more clearly, right? We can get you seeing a little bit better than 20/20. Or maybe you need an accommodative lens, you need you need like an anti-fatigue lens to help your accommodation. Maybe you need a different type of progressive, you need a different lens design. So I think number one is being really intentional about making sure we are addressing this individual's need to see as clearly as possible and as comfortably as possible. And then number two, making sure the eyes are healthy. So really educating the patients about what's going on with them, right? If they have any pre-existing condition. So not just pregnancy, but high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol. Sometimes people have done genetic testing and they know macular degeneration runs in their family. I explain what glaucoma is. I explain what these eye diseases are, so they kind of know what we're looking for. So I think my main thing is number one, a focus on individual based solutions for their best, most clear, most comfortable vision. And then number two is really educating about any health risk that they have individually, and also just educating more about what we are doing during the eye exam so that patients see the value. And that's really why they come to us, right? Because if we just are rubber stamping their prescription every year saying, oh, it's the same, keep moving, that doesn't really create value for the patient. So I think it's important that you explain all the different lens options that are available to them. Patients don't know there are anti-fatigue spectacle lenses, there are multifocal contact lenses, toric contact lenses. Patients don't know these things exist, and that's really where we come in to help them.
Yeah, I always like it when I can tell them about something and they don't have to come to me.
Mm-hmm.
I had a patient the other day that was like, well, my sister-in-law wears these multifocal contact lenses and she told me about them. And it was my first time seeing her. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry nobody's thought about telling you this before. Like, this would be a great addition to your life. So I always say, I want to tell you about it before you ever tell me, because that means that we've had that conversation a ton of times before. So
Yeah,
I like
absolutely.
the way of like, you're meeting them, you're like, I know my mission here and we're going to go through all of this and make sure it's like super clear and effective for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, okay. We've kind of had a lot of really fun things to talk about. And we've talked a little bit about our pregnancy, all of these things. We've talked about kind of what that looks like. I know you talked a little bit about kind of shifting your schedule, shifting your life. Like, what does that look like now? Tell me things like, how has your priorities and different things in your life changed over the past few, over time to kind of meet where you are today? And what do you kind of foresee that future looking like too?
Yeah, so one thing that I'm really grateful, a lot of women optometrists at different points throughout my career sort of always talked about, like, if you want to have a family, being understanding that like women are typically the primary caregiver of the child. And even if like the husband is super involved, like if the child is sick, the school calls mom. If the child forgets their homework, the school calls mom. And so you need to know that and you need to plan for that. And so I think for me, that was something I had heard or I knew years ago, but now that I'm like actually here, I'm looking at it a little bit differently. So I just had a baby. She's 10 weeks old, so we're not at that point yet, but now I have to like look forward and think about, okay, what does my career look like in 5 years? What does it look like in 10 years? Because that's when I'm going to want to be more present and be able to have, be able to go to the school and pick up and drop off and all of these different things. Yeah. So I think for me, it's just shifted sort of that vision for my life and my career. Up until this point, like I'd made a 10-year plan, like right when I got out of school. And I guess we're kind of at the end of that plan. So it's time to create a new vision. And it's just like you have to be intentional about knowing that you are going to need the flexibility, maybe in a way that your partner doesn't. So, working 6 days a week in a retail corporate practice is probably not going to be the best fit for someone who also wants to have a family and be super present, but to each his own. So I think for me, it's really just changed what I think about when I think about my vision for the next 5 years, 10 years, and what that looks like. And so the last decade, I prioritized flexibility, right? I wanted to be able to build my business. I wanted to be able to travel. I wanted to, I didn't want any restriction from work. And so I think as I look towards the future, it's more about, it's freedom and flexibility, but in a different way. It's like autonomy is what I'm prioritizing now. It's like, I don't need to be able to like travel at the drop of a dime, but I need the autonomy to say, I need to cancel the afternoon patients because I have to do this or that. So I think for me, it's just sort of a shift in what I think is important. Whereas before it was freedom and flexibility. And now it's a little bit more of a focus on autonomy and like control over my own schedule so that I can prioritize my family.
I love that. Did you, 10-year plan, you said you had one right after school, you're at the end of it. Did you feel like you reached most of the goals there, or were you like, oh my gosh,
no, I was actually laughing at this earlier today because I thought I'm 35 and I thought I was going to be a multimillionaire New York Times bestseller by now, which is like not the reality. But it's like I do have a book with Simon & Schuster. Like, I mean, there are lots of pieces of it that have certainly come to fruition. But yeah, so I mean, my vision was to build a wellness company, and I have a wellness company now. We do a lot of corporate wellness programming, which is opening a lot of doors for me. I wanted to be a speaker. I do that professionally. I'm a consultant with Johnson & Johnson. I speak to doctors. I wanted to, have a book, which I published a book last year with Simon & Schuster. Called the Glow Up Journal, which is a self-help book. And I really wanted to kind of create this wellness universe. And so I was able to do all of those things, which I think was really powerful. But I guess I thought that I would be like retired by now. I don't know. I mean, you like when you're like, I don't know, 24, 25, I guess you're more delusional. So it's like, yeah, I'm going to be like on a yacht.
Oh, yeah.
You're retired.
And you're like, there's no global pandemic that's going to come along. There's it's totally, life is not going to get in my way. Yeah.
It's crazy. So it's so funny to look back on that, but like so much has come to pass. And so when I look towards the future, to me, that looks like building, it looks like taking all of that experience and applying it to optometry now, and like applying that to my own practice, applying that to what I teach, applying that to how I'm treating my patients, sort of taking all of that experience and creating just my own version of what it means to be an eye doctor now that I've had a lot of years to have a career that was tailored to me, and I got to explore lots of different avenues and lots of different paths in the profession.
I think it's so cool to see. I feel like I remember doing something similar when I was in high school. Like, you're about to graduate and it's like, okay, at our 10-year reunion, what is life going to look like? And all of us are like, we're going to have great jobs and graduated college and 1 million kids and we're going to be married. And I have so many friends that are like, that is not realistic. This like younger self time felt very weird. I was like, oh, obviously by 23, 24, this is what life is going to look like. And that didn't even come close.
Yeah, but it's like you almost have to be that delusional because you get close. It's like, if you shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. Like the higher you shoot, at least you don't make it there, but you get closer, right? So it's kind of like that delusion helps you. It helps propel you to where you're meant to be.
Oh, yeah. And especially I think I've had a lot of changes where my priorities have changed even since every couple of years. I've seen a change in priorities of just what I needed in my life from either health things or just where I was as a person. And man, I think back to my younger self and I was like, I did not give her a lot of grace. Like this like 5-year, 10-year plan person, it was like, you're grinding every day. This is what you're doing. And now I'm like, whoa, maybe I want to do things different. So I completely
100%.
get that. Okay. So another thing that we talk a lot about on Lunch Date with Rachel and Kate is just like being a woman in the workforce, because that's a part of things. So, what strategies did you use when you were planning for your maternity leave and, kind of figuring out what was next? Like, what did you kind of think about? What did you guys plan for? All of those things to kind of help people that are like, I'm not there yet, but I kind of want to get an insight of what to think about.
Well, I mean, it depends on your employment structure, first and foremost. So I am an independent contractor, which means I get paid for the days or hours I work. If I don't work, I don't get paid. So knowing that going into it was really important. And so like we were on the same page in terms of like, what does maternity leave look like financially? I think like for me, in a way, being pregnant and having to go on maternity leave really makes you look at the finances of optometry totally differently. Like, whereas what I was making before I thought was enough, now it's like that's not going to work for me anymore. Like, when you just think about the cost, and it's like, so you think about the cost of maternity leave, right? So are you going to save for maternity leave? Does your partner have parental leave? Does your job offer maternity leave? Like, how are you going to do that? Any state programs you can use to subsidize things? And then it's like, what does it look like when you go back to work? That's the other piece of it. So are you going to send your baby to daycare? Do you have family close by? Are they going to share childcare responsibilities with you? Are you going to have to get a nanny? Like, what are you going to do with the baby when you go back to work? And so I mean, it just kind of makes you look at the board differently. Like, okay, this is what I'm planning for. This is what it's going to cost financially for me to not work for this amount of time. This is how I'm going to pay for that. And then when I go back to work, it's also like, okay, what makes sense now? Because does it make sense for you to go to work, 5-6 days a week when you don't have any support and you're going to have to now pay for childcare? One thing if you are wanting to send your children to daycare, a lot of daycares have very long wait lists. So it's like being intentional about researching that before you start the process and seeing how much it costs, right? The thing I think is really most important to understand is, of course, there's a financial commitment with having children, but it really starts when you're pregnant and thinking about maternity leave. And a lot of optometrists are independent contractors, so you don't have any sort of paid maternity leave in a way that a corporate W-2 employee does. Now, if you're working for a bigger corporate company, maybe there are some, maternity leave or FMLA perks, but for many optometrists, like if you work for a private practice, they're not going to really be able to pay you when you're not there because they have to pay somebody else to be there in your place. So I think it's important to plan and to see how much it's going to cost, to see how long you can afford to stay away. And then also, as a part of that planning, start to think about what you want to do with your baby. We're in that stage now. I'm going to go back to work probably like 2 months or so, but it's like, we don't have any family support. So it's like, we can't, I've asked a lot of people, what do they do? I've asked a lot of optometrists just so I can get a really clear understanding of what has worked for them. So many have said like, oh, my mom watches the baby 2 days a week, or, then I do this. And so it's like, there is that piece of family support that makes it, I think, a little bit easier, especially to have like multiple children. But if you don't, then you have to just decide. And so for me, I think that looks like working part-time as I have, because, it's like, we're going to have like a nanny, at least for a period of time while you sort through the daycare situation, which is like, there's a whole landscape. It's like, how do you know what daycare to send your child to? And then they're like, it's such a little baby. So it's like, you don't necessarily want to just send them anywhere. So I think that as a working woman, as a working optometrist, when you get pregnant, you have to start thinking about how are you going to finance your maternity leave, and what do those first few months look like before you put your baby in daycare, or if you need to put your baby in daycare right away. It's almost like once you get pregnant, you need to start focusing on that.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, I have friends that were not even pregnant yet and just got on wait lists because they were like, we just know that we need that at some point. And I was like, man, oh my gosh, like I hadn't even thought that far yet. And so I completely.
It's so crazy, but I mean, it's true. Like, people are on wait lists, like 9, 10, 11, 12-month waiting lists for daycare.
Yeah. And I live in South Central Kansas. And so our landscape looks a little bit different just because of where I live. But I mean, even the cost, it was interesting to hear somebody say, they were like, well, I have my mortgage payment and my daycare payment. And so that's what I kind of think about with cost and things, so talking with like my spouse of like, okay, what is more fiscally responsible for us to both be working full time? Is it not? What does this look like? And, I'm super fortunate with I'm a W-2 employee, and we have maternity leave coverage for part of it and then short-term disability. So make sure also, as you're looking at benefits for this next year, if you're planning on, you're planning on becoming pregnant, or that's something that you want in your future, make sure you have short-term disability if that's offered
But
by your
make sure
company.
your short-term disability covers pregnancy. So I
Yes.
have short-term disability insurance, but it doesn't cover pregnancy.
Yeah, it's in
So
there. It's especially in even with long-term disability too, make sure that that is a part of that rider as well, because otherwise you're kind of up a creek when things happen. Because if it's after the fact, you can't, if you become pregnant and then get short-term
yeah,
disability
then
and
you
that's a part of the
can't.
rider, it
Mhm.
doesn't work in that situation too. It's just, so make sure you're just thinking ahead, looking at those things if your company does offer that, because it's helpful, but if you don't do it, then it's not helpful. Yeah. So it's
100%.
always, man, and then looking at FMLA benefits as well. There's a lot of things that kind of are stipulations in FMLA. There's lots of good things, but making sure you're qualifying if you are W-2. That's huge as also. But at Lunch Date and Rachel and Kate, we do something called action takeaways and action items. So what is like one thing that you took away from today? And then one thing that is your action item that you want to like, you're like, okay, I'm going to put this into practice, or I'm going to think about or do this in the next week or two. Or a little longer since you're not in practice just yet. Back
Yeah.
again.
I mean, I think one thing I take away from this conversation today is just a reminder about like what it means to be a working woman. And just like, I think because I am on maternity leave right now, everything I am in the process of like sort of redefining what I want work to look like or what I want the future to look like. And this conversation just sort of like re-energized me and gives me, just a little bit to think about when I am designing what my return to work is going to look like. So I would say that is my takeaway. And then what I'm going to put into practice is number one, like the main thing, again, like we talked about earlier in the podcast, is getting your patients to feel as comfortable as possible. So it's like when we talk about pregnant patients, when we talk about all of these different patients that come into our practice, right? What can we give them and how can we make them as comfortable as possible? And that is for me, making sure they're in a daily disposable product. The AccuView Oasis One Day Max, I love. And so I think it's just a conversation to have with patients, making sure that they know this type of lens exists. Like we kind of talked about our pregnant patients, but even if someone's not pregnant, I think, again, since I have been off, I haven't been in practice, but this makes me re-energized as well to think about how I can make sure my patients are feeling as comfortable as possible and making sure they're in the best products.
Yeah, I love that. I think my takeaway from this is like meeting people where they are and figuring out, showing up as a really strong provider. Man, when you just were like, I have two goals with every patient to make sure they're seeing clearly and making sure that they're feeling great and their ocular health is awesome. Man, I just think that was a really clear and concise way to think about it. And that might help demuddy some waters of some very complicated appointments of like, all right, let's just get down to the nitty gritty of it all.
Mhm.
I think my action item is I have a couple dry eye patients that we're trying just a lot of different things with, and they are a little hesitant to change up their contact lens routine. And so maybe it's just pushing a little bit more back to that daily disposable, like you said, going
Mhm.
back to that
And I
AccuView
always
with
and
One
always
Max.
give
Yeah.
them the way, especially if they're more hesitant, is let them know the flexibility, right? You don't have to wear it every day or you don't have to wear it for a full day. Like give them flexibility. I think that always helps people feel like, okay, I'm not, I don't have to wear this 24/7. It just kind of takes some of the pressure off. So when you are, especially working with those patients, I just always kind of give them like flexibility to ease into the contact lens wear, ease into the daily disposable wear, flexible daily disposable wear. And it just kind of gives them some options so they feel like empowered. They get to make that decision how they're going to wear the lens as opposed to feeling like giving them like options to choose from as opposed to should I wear the lens or should I not? It becomes like, how should I wear it?
Yeah, that it's a tool in your toolkit rather than this is the only thing that's happening. Like, yeah, you're gonna have days where you're not gonna want to put on your contacts, and that's fine. And you're gonna have
Mhm.
days that you're gonna be excited to put them in because they feel good and they feel, you're gonna put them in, and it's not gonna feel like you're wearing a contact lens. It's just a part of naturally who you are. So, oh
Mhm.
my gosh. Well, I again am just love that we got to chat and catch up because I know it's been a little bit of time. And so it's super fun to have you on today. I am so thankful that Johnson & Johnson has just been a part of this as well. I just love what they do for empowering women and other individuals in our community just to be their best selves and have just really awesome experiences too. So thank you so much, Danielle. It was so good to see you, and we'll talk again soon.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. And thanks for everyone for tuning in.
Hey, family, if you enjoyed this full podcast, don't miss out on more engaging content. Check out the next episode right here. And for the latest updates, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Your support means the world to us. Catch us in the next episode. Peace.